If you're living abroad and feel like you don't fully belong where you came from, but you don't feel anchored where you are now, you're not failing at this. You're not lost. You're in between. And that feeling isn't accidental. Living abroad is supposed to feel like arrival, like a line you cross, before and after, then and now. But for a lot of people who leave the United States, that moment never comes. Instead of arrival, there's suspension. You're not who you were, but you're not who you thought you become either. And nobody really talks about that part. The expectation is simple. You leave the US, you change the environment, and you feel different. And in the beginning, that expectation feels justified. Life slows down, the pressure eases, your nervous system relaxes. But over time, something else replaces the relief. Not stress, not panic. A quiet sense of being unmoored. The reason this experience is so unsettling is because it doesn't come with obvious pain. There's no crisis, no emergency, no clear problem, just a subtle awareness. And that awareness is I'm not fully connected to anything. And because nothing is wrong, people assume something must be missing. But what's missing isn't a place, it's continuity. When you leave the United States, you don't just change geography, you step out of an identity. The US doesn't just organize work and money, it organizes momentum. It tells you what matters next, what success looks like, how fast life should move, how to measure yourself against others. When you leave, that identity shuts off, not violently, quietly. At first, the silence feels like peace, but silence without orientation becomes disorienting. You're no longer being pushed, but you're also no longer being pulled. And humans are not built for endless openness. We need frames. The space nobody warns you about is this, and this is what people don't prepare you for. You didn't go back, but you also didn't arrive. You're living abroad, but you're not rooted there yet. You're detached from your old identity, but you haven't formed a new one. That space is real, and it has weight. People misunderstand this feeling because they confuse movement with transformation. Leaving feels like change, but change doesn't automatically produce integration. Integration takes time and often friction. Living abroad removes friction before replacement arrives. So you're left floating between reference points. Not everyone who lives abroad experiences this. And the difference isn't strength or adaptability, it's how tightly identity was tied to structure before they left. Once you see that, the responses become clear. Some people leave the US and settle easily. They form new routines, They adopt new rhythms. They don't question who they are. That's because their identity was never rigidly defined by the system. They moved and continuity followed. This video isn't for them. Others feel the discomfort but never name it. They feel restless, so they move cities, change routines, chase novelty. They stay busy. They mistake motion for grounding, but the feeling stays because the issue isn't stimulation, it's integration. Then there are those who recognize what's happening. They see that their old identity doesn't fit anymore. Their new life hasn't solidified yet. They're not lost, they're suspended between versions of themselves. This part is the quietest part of living abroad. You notice old ambitions feel distant, new ones feel undefined. Comparison no longer works. Motivation doesn't behave the same. You're not regressing, you're recalibrating, but without a map. Being in between feels uncomfortable because identity likes coherence, but coherence only comes after transition. What you're feeling isn't failure, it's the cost of stepping out of a defined structure before a new one forms. Here's the contradiction most people never resolve. Freedom feels good until it removes the structure that told you who you were. Living abroad gives you freedom first and identity later. That gap is the in between. This phase is not a detour, it's not a mistake. It's the psychological midpoint of relocation. If you rush through it, you carry unresolved identity forward. If you recognize it, it settles on its own timeline. Now, this experience is not regret, confusion, failure, or indecision. And it's not a sign you chose wrong. It's the absence of narrative. You're in between stories. Living abroad doesn't instantly give you a new self. It dissolves the old one first. And there is always a pause between those two things. That pause is what you're feeling. This is where the arc completes. You left the US, you felt the system loosen, you realized it didn't untangle everything. You named the dislocation. And now you can see the truth. You're not stuck, you're in between. And that's not a problem to solve, it's a phase to understand. You don't need to rush out of this space, and you don't need to explain it to anyone. Living abroad doesn't end when you arrive somewhere new. It ends when your identity catches up. Until then, you're not lost, you're just in between.